that epiphany that, wait a minute, dollar for dollar, largest human trafficking market is the United States of America. We don't have a centralized, we don't have a centralized unit or department that's fighting this. And at the end of the day, these girls are, and it's little boys too, and we can get into that, but these are illicit commodities that are sold on a black market. We understand that really well.
Do you focus on the U.S. then?
Platforms. Yeah, we only focus in the United States of America.
I think it'll be all right.
Awesome. Here we go. Nic McKinley, I appreciate your time, man. This is absolutely great. Been looking forward to this for a couple months now, and here we are.
Well, thanks for having me. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah. I was kind of going to just start this off and allow you to tell us just a little bit about you and where you grew up and how you end up going into pararescue.
Oh, okay. Well, so my mom, my birth mother met my birth father, and then I was the product of that. Never knew either of them. Birth father was never in the picture, from what I understand. And we don't know exactly the age, but somewhere around 2 to maybe 2.5 years old, I was dropped off on the doorsteps of an orphanage in Missouri. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Yeah, in Missouri, and then was put up for adoption in Wyoming. So, was an orphan. Turned out that had a much bigger effect on my life that I didn't realize until probably 5 or 6 years ago. And then, and actually might actually be one of the things that's responsible for some of my success, getting through some hard stuff. And then moving forward, got adopted by some amazing parents who whisked me away to Billings, Montana. And when you're a kid growing up in Montana, one of the things that you don't realize is how stinking lucky you are to grow up in Montana.
Aww.
But you're a kid growing up in Montana, you're seeing movies and TV shows and, the big cities and other places around the world. And so, of course, in my youthful arrogance, I needed to get the heck out of Montana and, go see the world. And that's when I walked actually into the recruiter's office. And so this is the mid 90s. This is probably 95. And in the 90s, recruiting offices were all in these strip malls. And, they had the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. I don't even think there was one for the Coast Guard. And they're all essentially just separate doors in the same hallway.
Yep.
And so I walked in, talked to the Marine Corps recruiter, thought, man, that sounds pretty cool. Went over and saw the Navy recruiter, and he told me that I could go straight in to go be a Navy SEAL. And I was like, man, you mean I get to go be Charlie Sheen, in the tower with the gun that can see through walls? Man, I want to do that. And so I was signed up to be a Navy SEAL. And, you're kind of negotiating with recruiters, but you don't realize that. Yeah. And so I said, I really want to be a SEAL. I want to be a medic in the SEAL teams. I've read these books about Vietnam. I've seen Navy SEALs, the movie. That's what I want to do. And he was like, well, we'll do our best, but we can't guarantee that the Navy, if you make it through BUDS and you make it through all that, we'll send you to go be a medic. So I was a little disappointed, but it seemed like that was the right move. Talked to the Army recruiter and well, you can go Special Forces and be 18 Delta, but they didn't have the X-ray program back then. So you're going to go into the regular Army, maybe go to the Ranger Battalion, and, let's just face it, their recruiting videos weren't quite as cool. And so I just didn't really, tap into that. Because, when you're a young man, why do most young men join the military? Pre-September 11th, I would say that it wasn't for God and country and all that. I mean, that was probably secondary or tertiary. You want to go do some cool stuff.
Yeah,
that's what it came down to. And so I was like, man, I want to go do that. And then Air Force recruiter hits me up as I'm walking out of the Navy recruiter's office one day. He's like, hey, I've seen you in here a couple of times and you haven't come over and checked out the Air Force. I'm like, man, I don't really, there's nothing I really want to do there. And he's like, well, we have this program. It's very similar to Navy SEALs or Army Special Forces. We've got Air Force Pararescue and Air Force Combat Control. It's Air Force Special Operations. You might be interested in it. And I just, again, youthful arrogance, blew him off. And then he said the magic words as I was walking away. He's like, "That's all right. You probably wouldn't make it anyway." And I about faced and walked right into his office.
Awesome.
The guy's brilliant. And then he showed me, their recruiting videos, and here's the stuff you're going to do. And then he said the magic words, which was all pararescuemen are combat medics. You're going to go get your paramedic certification. Oh, and by the way, all these schools that the Navy and the Army can't promise you, dive school. Obviously, if you're a SEAL, you're going to get dive school. But at the time, most SEALs actually weren't getting Halo, definitely weren't getting Halo in their pipeline. If you're going special forces, you're not going to get dive or Halo. And so, at least in the pipeline, and in pararescue, you're going to get everything, and you're going to get all your mountain warfare training. And I loved being in the mountains. I was a ski patroller when I was in high school. Whole other story. Managed to convince them that the 16-year-old kid was actually 18. And so I signed up right there, and that's kind of how I ended up in pararescue.
No, that's awesome.
So when you were in high school, did you plan on, did you want to be in the military? Did you already have that as a plan, or was it kind of, okay, I didn't know if it was a spontaneous, so I just walked in there just to see what it was about?
No, school for me, I've talked about this on a couple of different podcasts, where when I was a senior in high school, they had just come out with the electronic attendance systems. And maybe they'd kind of come out with them the year before, but I was just starting to kind of pay attention how they were taking attendance. And, they had the little bubbles that you had to fill in. Well, those bubbles go into a machine, and you are the same position in every single class. So if your name is, bubble number 13, then you're bubble number 13 in every single class.
Okay.
So if you can go into the machine because you allegedly have a buddy who works in the main registration office during one of the periods, and you can go in there and you can just put a little piece of tape over the little sensor that looks at bubble number 13, then it appears that you are always there, even if you aren't. So I was pretty good at taking tests. So my friends would let me know when it was test days, and I would show up and I would take tests, and I did good enough to pass. And then I got a lot of ski days in that year.
I was going to say, what were you doing when you were not there?
Man, the skiing in Montana.
Driving a 1976 CJ7 between Billings, Montana and Red Lodge, Montana with my skis in the back.
Oh, man.
He would love that.
Yeah.
He's a big skier.
Yeah. Which
kids listening to this, that was a terrible decision. I should not have done that. I should have paid more attention in school. Learned. I made up for it later, but that's... Yeah. So once I decided I wanted to go to the military, and I knew my grades were good enough and my ABSAP scores were good enough, and I'd already been accepted on a delayed entry program that my parents signed off on. At that point, I was just like, to me, high school was a wash. All I had to do was,
Right. Oh.
Did you have any deployments as pararescue? Did you ever get stationed
14.
anywhere overseas? 14 deployments?
Yeah, I did 14 deployments.
Wow.
First combat deployment was, I believe it was Operation Desert Fox in 1990. Man, was that 98 or 99? Yeah, that was kind of the first one. Combat pre-September 11, like pre-Afghanistan, Iraq, were pretty benign by comparison, right? I mean, you'd come back, I remember coming back from Operation Desert Fox, and it was cool that, we'd gotten shot at a little bit. We shot back a little bit, primarily from helicopters. It's not what it was post September 11th. And then post September 11th, I was on one of the first groups to deploy, and it was actually to, I can't say the actual location that we were sent to, but it was in conjunction with Operation Northern Watch, which was the containment that had been the containment operations. There was Southern Watch and Northern Watch, and that was basically the containment operation that had been running since the Gulf War. There were always PJs deployed. In fact, pre-September 11th, it's funny because when I was at the agency, and even in the military, I'm talking to all these other people in SOF, and you'd have a SEAL who maybe had one deployment, and PJs were constantly deployed. There were always PJs in Northern Watch, Southern Watch, separate, different places around Africa, the Philippines. And so if there was something going on, pararescue was always involved. because there wasn't really that many things going on. So I was able to deploy in support of a task force that was running in and out of northern Iraq. And that was right after September 11th, because the DOD, Rumsfeld, Cheney, wanted to go after Saddam, and they wanted to use September 11th as an excuse to go after Saddam. And I think that the record is pretty clear on that now, that was really their agenda. And the CIA was saying, no, this was bin Laden in Afghanistan, and that's the thing that we need to go solve that problem first. Yeah. And so when we deployed, I went to a workup that was kind of middle of nowhere, Virginia, at a JSOC facility. And then these agency guys and these JSOC guys show up at our workup at the medical portion, and we're like, you guys are going to Iraq too? They're like, nah, man, we're on our way to Afghanistan. And I remember thinking, man, like we can we drive past this smoldering Pentagon, and we're like, oh, we're going to go start 2 wars at the same time. I'm a relatively young guy. So, I wasn't really thinking geopolitically back then. And I was like, okay, like whatever, we're America, go get them. Yeah. And then when we got into the place where we were launching from into Iraq, then we start hearing about what's going on in Afghanistan. So then the team that I was part of was like, oh, well, because the ticks that we were getting in, the troops in combat or troops in contact that we were getting into, right, the fights that we were getting into weren't that big of a deal. I mean, they were, and that sounds really funny to say for just civilians listening. Yeah. And they're like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like gunfights aren't really that big of a deal? It's like, when you're in the United States of America and you show up to a fight, especially in those relatively tribal regions, you are so over prepared with the air support and the people to your right and left that sometimes you're like looking for something to do in the middle of a fight because like all the jobs are taken. Yeah. And so you're just kind of standing there looking at each other like, all right, well, oh, hey, there's Apache just got him. Right, well, all right. So it's just not even, it's not a fair fight, and it shouldn't be, quite frankly. So we thought for sure they're just going to send us over to Afghanistan. I mean, we'll pack up these ISU 90s and we'll be over there. And nope, they left us there for a full deployment and then ripped us out with yet another unit to do it.
What would they utilize pararescue for? What would differentiate pararescue between just somebody that's on a medevac? Is it pararescue is just essentially, are you going to be on a medevac generally, but only in like really hot areas? How does that work?
No, so pararescue, the focus is on rescue. And the thing that you need to be able to do is keep hurt people alive when you get there. So pararescuemen are certified in all of your infiltration platforms. They can lock out of subs, they jump out of airplanes, do everything in between. Okay. Operate in vertical environments, be that urban terrain or mountainous terrain. They can operate as self-contained teams. Usually what you're doing as a PJ is you're either operating as a self-contained team on something, basically you're the high threat medevac on a special operations target, or you're embedded into an ODA or a SEAL team or a Marine. In my day, it was Force Reconnaissance, now it's MARSOC, you're embedded in with somebody doing, you're there to be the guy that people look to when things go wrong. And so the real emphasis is on rescue, but then obviously your job is not to save people because it's bright lights and cold steel in hospitals and surgeons, right? They're the ones that actually save people. Your job is to keep somebody alive and in good enough condition so that the surgeons can save them. Yeah. So you are trained, to the civilian paramedic level, and plus really a considerable level of training when it comes to minor surgical procedures, blood transfusions, dealing with pediatric issues because kids get hurt on targets, and it does a lot to win hearts and minds if you can save those kids. Yeah. Plus just, we're Americans, we care about life, and we have a duty to save those kids. So that's really where pararescue is focused, is on the rescue side. Yeah.
How long was it between when you were in the pararescue that you went to CIA?
So I left pararescue, did a couple years of private personnel recovery, which is just a really fancy way of saying I worked for the biggest insurance companies in the world, getting really rich guys out of bad places because they made really bad decisions, usually involving women and booze.
Okay.
And so they get themselves into some trouble. And it was, I mean, I remember sitting at the boardroom table of a publicly traded company working with the CEO, the legal counsel, and the chief security officer as a 27-year-old kid who, yes, I had 10 years of pararescue experience under my belt. I was actually still in the Guard or the reserves at the time. And I'm the guy who's got the ideas on how to solve their problems. And that's kind of when I realized that, the corporate world, the emperor's not wearing a lot of clothing there. There are very bright people who are very good at one thing. And if anything goes wrong, they don't really have the ability to think about how to solve those problems. So I did that for about 2 years. And the problem that I ran into was that you are incentivized not to do what's best for the mission, which is recovering the person. You're incentivized to make it as cheap as possible for the insurance company, because that's ultimately who's paying the bills. That's your client. And that just didn't sit well with me. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. It just wasn't really congruent with my views on the importance of focusing on the mission and executing the mission and succeeding in the mission at all costs. And let's just say that they didn't agree. And so they thought I spent way too much money getting people out. 100% success rate on missions, recovered everybody that they ever sent me after. And then also some of the things that were going on, there's a lot of stock price protection that just didn't sit well with me. And I was pretty naive and just decided that I needed to move on. So I actually ended up I did a quick stint in Hollywood because I'm very much like Forrest Gump, and I'm kind of nobody, but I fall into these amazing opportunities. A Hollywood A-list actor came to meet me because I was volunteering for my law enforcement at the place I was at, or the city I was living in. I had a great little deal with them. I wanted a place to shoot. They didn't have a budget to hire instructors, so they gave me a key card to their access to their SWAT range and all the ammo I could shoot in return for. I would teach one rifle course, one like patrol rifle course, a quarter for them. And so it worked out really well. So I'm out there and these movie guys show up because they want to teach this A-list actor how to look like he knows what he's doing, holding a gun. They see me teaching. They're like, hey, we'd like to meet this guy. And the guy was an action hero. And I don't want to say the movie because that'll give away who it is. Because we're still very close friends. And they're like, oh yeah, it's this guy. He plays this action hero. And I'm like, oh, he must be like a pretty big dude. So I walk up to the guy's bodyguard because I don't watch TV. I'm not really a movie guy. I'm a total buzzkill, right? That's not who I am. And so I walk up to the guy's bodyguard and I was like, oh, hey, I'm Nick. It's good to meet you. And this A-list actor standing next to him. And, a lot of these guys, when you see them in real life, they're just totally normal dudes.
Yeah.
And he started like laughing. He thought it was so funny. And so I worked for him for about 6 months. And right before that, I'd gotten a phone call, which said, we would like you to try out for a program. And then they didn't say who they were. They just said, hey, we're so-and-so with the U.S. federal government. We would like you to try out for a program, but we can't tell you what the program is. And if you ever get that phone call, the answer is always yes. No is not even an option, right? So I said, yeah, sounds good. So I went to a tryout, kind of, the thing that you would kind of almost like think happens in a movie, right? You show up as nondescript building. There's a company's logo on it. Go upstairs and everybody takes a bunch of tests, and there's a bunch of dudes in there who are just like me, same type of background. You got a pretty good idea what's going on, but you don't know for sure. And then, you take these tests and you kind of feel dumb when you're done with the test. You're like, oh, no way I passed. And then they came out and they said, they read off some names, and they said, if your name was read off, please go back into the room. And if your name was not read off, then we won't be needing your services. Please, please leave. And so I got to go back in the room, and there was probably about half of us left. And then somebody walked in and said, we're with Central Intelligence Agency. You probably figured that out by now. And there's this program. This is what you'll be doing. roughly. And if you want to try out for that, tomorrow you'll start a multi-week, I don't want to say how long it was, a multi-week tryout process. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay. Please leave.
So what was more challenging, that prep or going into for pararescue?
Oh, pararescue, hands down.
Yeah.
So everybody at that unit at the time, you had to have a minimum of 6 years in special ops. They were very clear what they defined as special ops. These days, like everything's special ops. And I mean, like, we're in the longest war in the history of our country, and I've never met a cook or a mechanic. Everybody was a, big time special ops door kicker. So everybody had a minimum of 6 years of special ops experience. So for me, I had 10 years in pararescue. And I barely made the cut because 2.5 years of training plus, I did 3 years as an instructor, which that time counted. But you also had to have, I believe it was a minimum of 3 deployments to the Afghanistan, Iraq area. And I only had I want to say 4 to those areas. So maybe 5. But I know I was close to the line.
Yeah.
And so everybody in that room had that level of experience. So it wasn't, hard. It was really a gentleman's course, but we lost people. And I would say the reason why is because it was you had to take these tests where you just couldn't have a bad day. Anybody who has been through any selection process can tell you that everybody has a bad day. You just pray it is not going to be on test day.
Exactly.
And we had a couple of guys who were better shooters than me. Mm-hmm. And I remember one guy, he drew, and for some reason, as he presented his handgun, he let go of that thing. His handgun, his Glock went flying down range.
That's so embarrassing.
And he just hung his head, and when the line of fire was done, they had everybody holster, sent him down to go walk, grab his gun. And of course he failed that line, and out he goes. And, I mean, so the CQB stuff, it's just, guy has a bad day, misses a corner, doesn't take an angle right, and he's out. And so it was one of those courses where it wasn't hard. You're not doing push-ups and stuff like that, right? PT standard was the highest PT standard in the CIA, but anybody who's ever actually worked at the CIA knows that that's not saying a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was we probably lost 30% of the guys in our class. Okay. And then a couple months later, I was on a covert action platform operating out of Baghdad.
Oh, cool.
So I just have a random question for the CIA. Do they go out and kind of recruit and pick people, or can you be like, hey, I want to be in it and kind of apply to be in it? How does that work? Oh, okay.
Both. So it depends on the program.
Okay.
Every person who's a staff officer, for the most part, there are exceptions. I'll tell you, the exceptions are not, white guys with blue eyes. So there are exceptions, but for the most part, everybody applies through the website.
Okay.
So there's a combination of, when I first started, which was something that, those years I'm not really allowed to talk about. Mm-hmm. And then when I became a staff officer, so a team leader, then it was, okay, they already know me. I'm already cleared. Mm-hmm. They've asked me to submit for this position. And I didn't really want to do it because the position I was in before was the best gig going in the U.S. government at the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, you were tons of time off, getting paid extremely well. And I was like, all right, I'm going to basically by the third time they asked me, they're like, Nick, we're not going to ask you again. If you're going to you need to do this. And so I did, but it was, hey, we need you to go to the website. We need you to put in an application. This is the job we need you to apply for, which was not the job I was actually applying for. And we got people on the back end of the computer system waiting for your resume to come through. So,
okay.
So is it kind of like a you're the golden child type of thing if they actually go out and ask you to join rather than applying because they want you because if they.
So in my case, they asked me to apply in the beginning, but it's not, trust me, it's not because I'm a golden child. It's because they really needed people with my skill set. They needed that special operator because they're really trying to plus up that unit at the time due to multiple fronts happening. There's a whole new theater opening up. They just needed more people.
Yeah.
Okay.
And And so that's kind of how that happened. On the kind of more traditional sense of what you would think of as the Central Intelligence Agency. If they're coming to, the kid in the university, it's because they're a unicorn. That's somebody, and they're saying, hey, we want you to consider applying for this program. They're never going to go anywhere near headquarters. Like I worked at headquarters, right? They're never going to go anywhere near headquarters. They're in a special program.
Okay.
It's because they have, shall we say, they are part of a cultural, like a native cultural demographic from a country that is of significant interest to the policymakers of the United States.
Oh,
cool.
Right. So if you're a, 5'2", Chinese PhD student from Hong Kong, you might get a tap on the shoulder.
Okay. I just wanted to ask, your entire career, what was the most difficult point in your career, if you're willing to talk about it, or a less difficult point if you can't talk about the most difficult point, and how did you overcome it? Hard question.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I've never really thought about that, actually. The most difficult point in my career is when I thought I could do everything. I thought I could try to be married and start a family and be operator guy, gone 10 months a year. Right. Like that's really the most difficult point. I wouldn't say so pararescue is difficult. Statistically, people can do the math for themselves. It's a significant undertaking, but it's not really that hard. You know what's expected of you. Yep. You either meet the standard or you don't. It's that simple. And there's an element of like kind of getting lucky. And so for me to go through pararescue selection, I had the privilege of being, one of our top graduates in our selection, which is like 8 guys are left, right? I mean, so there's like everybody is super lucky. That means you didn't get hurt. That means you didn't have a bad day on a test day. Cause trust me, you have bad days in selection, but I never had a bad day on a test day. Very meaningful day. I didn't kind of fall in with the wrong crowd and make stupid decisions. Right. So you put that many lucky people together and it just kind of like luck intensifies.
Okay.
And then, pararescue school is the same thing. And that stuff is fun. You're jumping out of airplanes, you're doing medical stuff, you're shooting guns, you're climbing rocks. I mean, that is fun. And you're getting a paycheck to do it. And so none of that is really that hard. And I am just somebody where if you grind on me, that's just going to fuel me to make me want to go harder. And so that was the, pararescue school. I ended up getting the Commandant's Award out of pararescue school, which is, one of the top awards out of the school. And not because I was better than anybody there, because trust me, that is 100% not the case. I just was, fueled differently. And so going through all that stuff, it's just really not that hard. The missions, right? A mission happens and like, you're super excited. That's the reason you joined. That's the thing that you're there to do. But it was really trying to figure out how to balance that spectrum of personal life and operator life. And
when did you get married?
When?
Yeah. At what point did you get married in that?
About a year before I left the Air Force.
Oh, okay.
And I'd broken my leg right before that on a training accident. And so, it was, there's a lot happening at once, but I was talking to somebody the other day who's, he's in the Guard now, Green Beret, is getting ready to graduate. Used to work at one of my companies, and he was just kind of in town for Christmas. And I was talking to him, and I was helping him understand that it's a spectrum, like operator guy, family guy. It's a spectrum, and the two are mutually exclusive. You cannot. I don't care who you are. You cannot do both equally well.
Yeah,
and so you have to choose.
Yeah.
And he was thinking about, that SF track of me, maybe going to Delta down the road. And I'm like, okay, well, like, look at the divorce rate at that unit. My unit at the agency, 86% divorce rate.
Yeah.
Right. So do you really think, cause he's like, oh, but I'm pretty sure I can keep it all together. I said, yeah, said every operator who ever came before you. I said, do you really think that you're that much better than everybody else who's been down this, what is a linearly predictable path?
Yeah.
And he was like, I see what you mean. I didn't have anybody to tell me those types of things. So in my youthful arrogance, I was like, oh, well, I've done all these other hard things. I mean, this doesn't seem that hard. Let me do that too. And that I think was really the hardest part. And then of course it meant that I ended up like dealing with, fighting a divorce while I was deployed, literally dealing with national security issues in a, civil court, trying to make a judge understand that. That was fun.
So you obviously, DeliverFund is a major point of why I wanted to talk to you and what you do with DeliverFund. So how did you fall into that? Why did you go into specifically human trafficking?
I was overseas, and we had, kind of the long story short, we had what I like to call smoking gun intel on a human trafficker. And I was working with a TFO counterpart, and that he was acting as the case officer. And my job, I wasn't a case officer. I don't type fast enough for that. I was best way to put it, what it was that we did was we did operational facilitation. So if there's an asset that needs to be picked up on a street corner in a very dangerous area, like we're the ones that would do that. If there is somebody who needs to do overwatch of a meeting on a sniper rifle, in a building, in a sniper hide somewhere, we're the ones that would do that. So very much supporting the case officer's operations, which was super fun. And a funny aside, at the same time that the agency approached me for the program that I was in, I was like, oh, well, let me go check this out. And I dropped also an application to be a case officer. And so I was in that pipeline. Mm-hmm. And then I got to my first assignment with the agency, and I was like, hey, I'd like to, kind of talk to some of the case officers. And so they take me to the bullpen, which is where all the case officers sit. And they were like, kind of showed me around. And at that time I was working on this covert action program where we were a standalone element. We weren't working with case officers. We were doing something else for another directorate within the agency. Mm-hmm. And we were facilitating some like really cool, best way to classify would be sabotage operations. Super fun. Actually, one of the most fun things I did at the agency. And so I went to go talk to the case officers, and I'm like talking to them, and I was like, wait a minute, like this is what you do? And I really got to intimately see behind the curtain of what they did on a day-to-day basis. And that's when I went back and withdrew my package and was like, I am no longer interested in this. Thank you. This is not going to work for me. So anyway, we're doing this work overseas and counterterrorism related. And we came up on, again, what I like to call smoking gun intel on a human trafficker, and tried to figure out where that goes. So intel within the intelligence community, right? It's not magic. It doesn't just show up in a place magically, right? So think about the best analogy to think about it is like the financial system with account numbers and routing numbers, right? If I wire money to you and I have your account number and your routing number, the combination of those two means that the money that I send will get to you, which is the right place it's supposed to get. Intel works the same way, right? To get the intel from, middle of nowhere, Afghanistan to the right person at CIA headquarters or wherever it's supposed to go, there's a way that happens. And, think of it as like codes that get attached to the intel. And we couldn't find who was responsible for receiving human trafficking intel. And before that, when you're doing work, and my understanding is you have a law enforcement background, you can't know what human trafficking is and be involved in, say, counter narcotics operations and not see human trafficking. And you just assume somebody is doing something about it, right? That's not your mission. That's somebody else's mission. And they're focusing on that. What I learned through all that process is that there is nobody in the federal government who is has a singular focus on human trafficking. There are some incredible men and women in the FBI and in the Department of Homeland Security.
Why is that? You think? Not to interrupt you. Why is that, you think? Why do you think there's not more of a focus on it from the government side of things? I like it. Yeah.
That's simple.
Yeah.
Kids don't vote prior to the modern human trafficking epidemic. The children who were primarily trafficked were from socioeconomically depressed areas. Mm-hmm. And so those people have less political power. It's that simple, right? So I'll kind of come back to the story and how I got involved in this, but one of the things that I like to point out is our missing and murdered Indigenous women issue across the United States. Where I sit in Montana, one of the most beautiful, not one of, the most beautiful state in the entire union. We are absolutely the best state. We have the best skiing. We have the best water sports.
Next to Canada, right?
Yes.
Sorry,
Canada is the subdivision to our north.
Yeah.
That's our fallback territory. So we here I am in Montana, this incredible place. Yeah. Montana is one of the most dangerous states in the country to be a Native woman.
Really?
Yeah. That doesn't sit well with me. Why? Because what is the political power of the Native tribes? It's not 0, but it's not 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So if you had middle-class white girls going missing at the same rate that you have Native women going missing, this would be a national emergency. Yeah. It would be break out the secret checkbook, all hands on deck, congressional hearings, all this stuff happening. But because it's not happening to middle-class white girls, it's happening to some underprivileged Native women coming from tribal lands that everybody just kind of forgets about. These people are being exploited at scale.
Wow. That's current day?
That is current day.
Really?
And we're building technology tools at DeliverFund, thanks to generosity of donors, to actually solve that problem. But my point here is that the reason why we've seen an explosion in human trafficking, and like you said, there's no centralized government authority that's focusing on that, is because it primarily used to happen to women and girls who didn't have a voice. Now that has changed. The internet has democratized all things, right? You and I are able to have this conversation because of the internet. There's lots of good things that have come from the internet. Yeah. There's also a lot of really bad things that have come from the internet. And one of those is that the internet has made it so that the predators across the country can access all the prey across the country.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And for parents listening to this, what I mean is it used to be that child predators could only get access to the children that they could get physical access to. Mm-hmm. Today, a 40-year-old man who's 3,000 miles away from a 12-year-old girl who just made a TikTok video saying she's mad at her dad for not letting her wear the aging appropriate clothing to the mall or wherever kids go these days. Mm-hmm. A trafficker, that predator who's posing as a good-looking 16-year-old boy, can slide into her DMs and start manipulating her at her very point of vulnerability.
Yeah.
That's why we've seen such an explosion. And that's what I learned when I was at the agency and we started looking for where do we send this intel. And the cool thing about being at the agency, being a staff officer, is that you have access to everything in the government. You're read into almost every, broad spectrum classified program there is. You can reach into anything. Now, if you start going places you're not supposed to go, some people are going to show up to talk to you and find out why the heck you're going to places you don't have a need to go to. But so I started, again, working with his JSOC counterpart. We started trying to tear apart into the federal government, trying to figure out who had responsibility for this issue. And ultimately what I figured out was that there was nobody. And then, some federal agents doing it. Some of them today are doing on a full-time basis, but at the time, we're talking 10 years ago, there's more than that now, 12 years ago. At the time, it was most of the federal agents who were working the human trafficking issue. It was a secondary, tertiary duty, which meant that they hardly ever got to it. And what I found was that the major majority of the heavy lifting in the fight against human trafficking was being done by state and local law enforcement. So it's like, awesome, I'll just go help them. Because I've seen CSI Miami, like that's a follow documentary, right? A county sheriff's department needs to move a satellite or hack into a camera. Like they can do all that because we can do that in the agency. So surely they can. I didn't realize how bad, quite frankly, state and local law enforcement officers have it. And the absolute heroics that happen at state and local levels. A lot of times you've got investigators, detectives, right? Narcotics detectives, gangs detectives, who are doing the exact same job that we were doing at the CIA. Now, granted, they're not facing RPGs and belt feds. Right? And if they get captured, it's not, YouTube and in jumpsuit and the ending. Right. So it's not the same environment, but it's kind of the same job.
Yeah.
And they were doing it with 1/100th of the training and almost no budget. The number of law enforcement officers I met who were like buying beater cars for surveillance out of their own pocket, buying weapons and armor out of their own pocket. I had a buddy who was a SWAT guy in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and most of his gear was my old gear.
Okay.
Like I didn't even want anymore, right? And he was like sewing it together. I just didn't realize how bad state and local law enforcement had it when it came to the fight. And so that's when I just had that epiphany that, wait a minute, dollar for dollar, largest human trafficking market is the United States of America. We don't have a centralized, we don't have a centralized unit or department that's fighting this. And at the end of the day, these girls are, and it's little boys too, and we can get into that, but these are illicit commodities that are sold on a black market. We understand that really well. I know.
Do you focus on the U.S. then?
Platforms. Yeah, we only focus in the United States of America.
I love it.
We help other countries build their own platforms, but our focus is in the United States of America, because why are we going to Cambodia or Thailand or Vietnam to try to, rescue? And most of the times it's either a bunch of wannabe action guys or guys who were action guys and don't know how to not be action guys anymore. Why are we trying to solve problems overseas when we have this massive problem over here? Oh, and by the way, most of the predators who are going overseas to cause that problem are also doing predatory behavior here in the United States. And you can catch them here, where we have the best and least corrupt law enforcement and judicial system in the world.
So where does it differ? How do I ask this? When it comes to trafficking specifically, obviously we know there's predators attacking kids online, but what is the majority of trafficking situations? What does that look like? Because my understanding is, I did a lot of research on it. There's so many parents that get involved in it. Parents get involved in it. It's going down a negative road. And what are your thoughts with that?
Next thing you know, mom's selling the daughter for meth, heroin, whatever.
Yeah.
So familial trafficking, major majority trafficking that happens in the United States is commercial sex trafficking, and it is not prostitution. Those are two different things. Yep. So my friends on the right who try to say that, well, all prostitution is trafficking, like that is not true.
Right.
So let's not try to exacerbate a problem, make it worse than it is. It's already tragic enough. So human trafficking looks to the untrained eye predominantly like prostitution, but that is not what it is. It is women and girls being forced to perform a service, to perform labor for the economic benefit of somebody else. And those people are being controlled through fraud, force, or coercion. It is that simple.
And it's not getting any better from my understanding either.
No, but also when they're like grooming
them. It is in
them,
some places.
Is it? Good.
But yes. Sometimes when they're like grooming them, maybe like young girls, and they don't even realize they're being groomed to do that because they're so manipulated and brainwashed. So how do we teach the population, the young girls or the moms too, that maybe are, being groomed from their husbands or boyfriends to see the red flags? Like, it's like, how do we fix that?
That's a great question. The first way that we fix that is actually primarily falls with men. If you're a man and you have a daughter, be a good dad. Because the reason that she is primarily being manipulated is because she's trying to fill that God-sized hole in her heart. And she's trying to heal the wound that was, that father wound that was usually created by her dad. And that's not to take away from the importance of mothers. Obviously, mothers are incredibly important. But when it comes to trafficking and it's primarily females, it's a small percentage of boys, but it's primarily females. It is that, it's that father wound that they're trying to heal.
It's like
that's the very first thing is, dads, be good dads. Parents, be good parents. And then talk to your kids. If you go to DeliverFund.org and you look at our training page, we have like Human Trafficking 101, where you can actually take a certification course, get your little certificate, which works for, employment training in all 50 states, meets the criterias.
Awesome.
but go through that with your kids and talk to your kids about it, just like you talk to your children about drugs. If your children go away to college, they will see alcohol. They will see drugs. Like, that is a statement of fact.
Right.
That is, right? I don't care.
Yep.
I don't care if you send them to Liberty University. They're going to see that. So
Or
you
high
talk to
school.
them about it.
Yeah.
Right. High school, you tell them how to deal with these situations.
Yeah.
Trafficking is exactly the same way. So helping children understand that when what appears to be a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, asks them to send a photo that they don't want to send, that's a line that they shouldn't cross, because that photo will exist for forever.
Right.
And then usually what happens is, again, girl, in my day, I had 3 sisters, right? They go to their room, they write angsty girl things in their angsty girl journal, and they listen to the Cranberries or Sarah McLachlan or whatever, right? And that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Today, they go into their room, they get on the cell phone that their parents don't know that they have, connected to the neighbor's Wi-Fi that they don't know that they're connected to. And so the parents think they have their house locked down, and then they make that Instagram video, TikTok video, Snapchat, whatever it is. And then, eventually get hit up, manipulated, asked to send a photo, oftentimes. And then when they finally send the photo that they really regret, then it's called sextortion. Then the predator will just continue to get more and more photos. And these are kind of like a currency in predator world. And they'll post them on pornography websites, and they'll trade them between each other. Some of those predators are traffickers. And then they'll get that message that says, hey, if you want all of this to stop, meet me at the Starbucks, 2 blocks down. And so they do. And then next thing you know, they're in the back of a car and their life has changed for forever.
Jeez.
So helping your children understand that this can happen.
Yeah.
And for people listening who don't understand the scale of this, do you know any teenage girls?
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what was the question?
Okay.
Do
you know any teenage girls who have access to social media?
Oh, yeah.
I would say every single one.
Yeah.
Okay. So every teenage girl who has access to social media, I don't even know who they are. And I can tell you that they have been inappropriately solicited by an older man on social media.
Yeah.
Every single one. You will have an extremely hard time finding a teenage girl who's on social, or a preteen even, who's on social media, who has not been sexually solicited by an older man. That is how bad the problem is. It's a running joke in kind of teenage girl land. And so they will be solicited.
Yeah, I was just going to say how the parents will be like, oh, that would never happen to my kid. My kid would never do that. But it's not the kid necessarily engaging with it, but it's like the outside source that's coming in. Then, the parents are like, that would never happen. But it happens all the time. And I don't understand how to make parents realize that it's such a real big problem where I don't really even know how to control it with.
Just more people need to talk about it,
Yeah, people don't talk about it.
That and trafficking, because you hear the word trafficking and you don't really see much about it on the news or anything like that. And it's mind blowing to me. But I think so many people, they hear that word and they just kind of back off from it.
Well, I wanted to know, what is the probability when someone's been taken or whatever and you go to find them and save them? What's the probability that you'll get them back? It probably depends on a lot of stuff, but
the recidivism rates are really bad. And it all depends on how long they're in the trafficking situation. And the reason why is the psychological damage that's done. We all know women who have been physically abused, maybe just one time. We all know women who've been sexually abused, maybe just one time. We all know women who have been emotionally abused. We all know women with addiction issues. All of those separate women have significant problems. Human trafficking victims have all of those abuses happening to them multiple times every single day for years.
Yep.
So, I don't have the right letters behind my name to understand how to best help them, but that's also not my job.
Yeah.
My job is to go after the people who actually create it, because while when you look at the nonprofits that are fighting human trafficking, you have really two sides of it. You have the cleanup of human trafficking. Again, I'm not qualified to do that. There are absolutely heroic humans who are out there with creating victim restoration homes and things. And we need to support those nonprofits.
Yeah.
But you cannot have a human trafficking victim if you do not have a human trafficker.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Get to the root.
It's that simple. And so we focus, like there are other people who are focusing on pulling kids out of the river. We're moving upstream to figure out who's throwing the kids in the river in the first place.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that.
Yep.
Do your tech companies, I didn't read anything on your tech companies, and I apologize ahead of time, but did they have anything to do with DeliverFund, or what are your tech companies and what do they focus on?
So I have a company called 10 Point Data. We're a data and AI company. We build custom AIs for companies to help them be able to make sense of their data so that they can make faster and smarter decisions.
Okay.
Cool.
So when you look at, obviously the one everybody knows is ChatGPT, and you're trying to use ChatGPT to figure out how to do things better. Well, if you're a biotech company with a proprietary intellectual property, probably best not to upload that into a public ChatGPT website. And so what we do is we create and help companies be able to use those AIs for their own purposes without revealing any of their intellectual property. Okay. And so, yes, the engineers that I have over at 10 Point Data do a lot of pro bono work, helping to build DeliverFund's capability. DeliverFund also has its own engineers. We build our own technology tools, and part of the reason why we started doing that was a way for anybody who understands law enforcement or the intelligence community, a way to think of us as like the counterterrorism center or a HIDA for human trafficking. And so what I figured out, as you know, there's 18,000 state and local law enforcement jurisdictions across the United States. None of them are on the same technology platform. None of them really communicate with each other. And the only way that a detective in Nebraska is able to contact a detective in Dallas is if he either knows that detective because they used to work together, they met each other at a conference or something, they had a common case, or that detective in Nebraska has got to call the dispatch number just like any other civilian. In order to get in touch with that detective. And so what we do is we have a couple of different platforms. One we call Pathfinder, that is the largest database of commercial sex trafficking information on the planet. Billions of data points. I think we're over 90 terabytes of data, which if you know data numbers, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
We've got our own supercomputers that actually process that data.
Cool.
We build our own biometrics. We do everything in-house.
Wow.
And they're all purpose-built tools. And the reason why is because when I first started this, I started looking for technology to use. And what I found was some cybersecurity tools that were kind of being jerry-rigged into fighting human trafficking, right? Or some open source intelligence tools that quite frankly really weren't that good. And some analysis tools that were helpful as long as you had the data, but nobody was building purpose-built tools for the fight against human trafficking. And we finally found a couple of companies, but then one went bankrupt and went under. And then the next one went bankrupt and went under. And then another one kind of wasn't just, they weren't really doing much. And then another one was, being run by a celebrity and was basically like a really big marketing play. And it was good. And it was better than nothing. But nobody was building tools like we had at the CIA to go after terrorists. And that's the level of focus that I wanted to put on the fight against human trafficking. And so that's what we started building.
That's awesome.
I know there's no one answer. Well, there is one answer to end or fight the trafficking issue, and that's to get the bad guys. But
I would actually go one bit farther. The answer here is fathers, train your sons not to commoditize women and girls. Mothers,
that is so true.
Train your daughters to know their worth and not to commoditize women and girls.
Right.
So we help law enforcement go after customers, but that's a never-ending fight.
Right.
So that's not our primary mission.
Yeah, what can we do in our own communities or to even help other communities to help, against that? And I guess it does just kind of comes down to parenting, really.
So the first thing you can do is know what you're talking about. Again, the training that we have at DeliverFund right through our website, Human Trafficking 101, probably take you about an hour. And now you'll actually know. Don't get sucked into the conspiracy theories about the zip ties on the door handles of cars and the dollar that's, fentanyl laced that's just laying in the street and like all that conspiracy theory junk. Yeah. It's not true. Anybody wants to debate that with me, send me a location. Hillary Clinton drinking the blood of children in her basement, those kinds of crazy conspiracy theories. I don't care if you don't like Hillary Clinton, that's not actually happening. It's not a movie. These are real people's lives, and these are real people being exploited. And so one, understanding what it is, and then helping your children to understand that. What trafficking is. The second is being a safe space for your children and telling them that, like, hey, do not take pictures of yourself that you wouldn't want posted in your yearbook and put them on the internet. Like have that as a hard policy. And if your girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever asks for one of those photos, you tell them that is a line that you're not willing to cross. And if they truly love you, they truly like you, they will not ask you to cross that line. However, we know that parents have been trying to tell young girls for millennia that certain guys are no good. And how's that going? So, at the end of the day, my wife married me, right? So we need to help our children understand that if they do make a mistake, they're not going to get in trouble for that mistake. And they sent that photo that they regret. They need to come to you as parents immediately. And then helping, teenagers help their friends understand that if their parents aren't necessarily a safe place, they need to go to an authority figure. Walk into your principal's office, your school resource officer, flag a cop down, walk into a substation or a police headquarters, tell an authority figure. And if this happens to you, and it happens a lot more than you would think, because my phone gets the calls, what do parents do? Be the squeakiest wheel you possibly can. You call your city police, you call your prosecutor's office, you call the FBI IC3 office, you call the FBI's ICAC office, you call Department of Homeland Security, you call your county sheriff, whatever the equivalent thereof is. You tell law enforcement, and you make sure that somebody in law enforcement has the ball, opens an investigation, and you be the mama bear, be the papa bear, right? The second thing that you do is obviously collect screenshots, collect the evidence as best you can. Before you hand those phones over to law enforcement, you send those photos to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Do not send them to DeliverFund or any other nonprofit. Send them to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where they will hash those photos. So essentially do the math on those photos, and then they will send that hash to all of the tech companies, all the social media companies that will then automate looking for that photo. So if anybody tries to post it, it'll get torn down. And so that's the best protection you can give your children. And then also help them understand that those photos will end up on pornography sites that are outside the United States of America and outside American jurisdiction. And there's nothing that anybody can do about that. And that, unfortunately, is the consequence. And so helping them understand that consequence is very real. And every single person that has happened to thought, well, that only happens to other kids. That doesn't happen to me. And then the fourth thing is for parents to understand that anything that is connected to the internet is an open door for predators. So I have parents who will say, if you go to DeliverFund's YouTube, social media, whatever, you'll see a story called Noah. And it was a young boy who was targeted through a gaming console. And his dad was in cybersecurity at a very reputable company, knew exactly what he was doing. Everything was locked down. Didn't let their kids have the phone outside the kitchen, right? Had to use the phone in public areas, like knew everything. But he had an Xbox in his room, and Xbox is connected to the internet. And he was groomed and abducted through that grooming process. And it's kind of like a self-abduction is the way that it works. But go watch the Noah story at DeliverFund and you'll see kind of how that works. But help understand that anything that is connected to the internet that kids use, predators go there too. And so help them understand that anybody who tries to off-platform them, ask them where they live, get their phone number, right? Don't do it. And if you have not met somebody in person, do not give them your phone number.
Yeah.
If you have not met somebody right in person, right, and it's not okay with your parents, don't tell them. Don't even tell them what city you live in. And if they start asking, that's the beginning of a red flag conversation.
Yep.
Yeah. That's what I always say to the kids. Did we have a hard stop at 1 hour? I don't recall. I had another question, but I don't want to. If you have some,
no, go for it. I've got about another 20 minutes.
Okay, yeah. I want to. This is really shifting gears here, but I can tell by the way your knowledge. I work cybersecurity myself, and I have a significant interest in AI in general, and especially with everything that's going on in the world right now. What are your thoughts on all these drones and whatnot? That all this stuff that's going on. Do you have a thought? Are you allowed to air your opinion on what's going on?
Yeah, I don't really have a thought. And to be quite honest, when it comes to the day-to-day news, I have never been less informed, and it's glorious.
That's us.
We don't
I
watch
hear
the
from
news.
coworkers.
So I hear about like, oh, the Chinese government is launching these drones out of submarines onto the East Coast, and they've got this crazy technology, and they can take out the White House. And like, no, actually, that's not true. There's this thing called physics, and we have to abide by the laws of physics.
Yeah.
And when it comes to conspiracy theories, the thing that I learned working, again, that most of the time, if my unit was working, it was at the direction of the President of the United States. And the biggest thing that I learned was how absolutely incompetent our government is. And I say that as a guy who used to be part of that, right? I was part of the incompetence. Absolutely incompetent, right? I was on a podcast, I think it was Brad Lee's podcast in Vegas, and he was asking me, it was right after the Trump assassination attempt where he got shot in the ear. And, then there was a second one. And I hear people like, oh, well, the Secret Service must have been in on it. And, or that was a CIA op because, to only hit him in the ear. Talk to anybody who's worked in the government. Talk to anybody who's like a high-end sniper, as an example. And my friend Andy Stump and I were just talking about this, how like there's not a single person in the United States government who with an AR platform with iron sights could hit somebody in the ear from a rooftop. Like that's not a thing.
Like on purpose. Like, yeah.
Yeah. What people saw there, they got a window into the incompetence of their government that happens at every level every day. Which is why I'm such a big fan of this whole Doge concept that's happening. You look at the second assassination attempt, right? Secret Service agent draws and fires 6 rounds, from my understanding is about 5 feet, and doesn't make a single hit. Like a 70-year-old woman with a concealed carry permit has to shoot better than that to get their concealed carry permit. Like that's the level of incompetence. And I hear people say, well, you weren't there, stress factors. No, actually I've been in situations like that, and I know exactly how I performed.
Yeah.
So like our government's just extremely incompetent. And it's still the best government in the world. Yeah. And so if we're that incompetent as a government, how incompetent is everybody else? Yeah. And then always look at incentives. Why would the American population is so uneducated in geopolitics? It's frustrating. So let's just say this conspiracy theory on the drones, and they're all coming from China, and it's, they're going to, is China trying to collect intel on us? Sure. And we're collecting intel on them. I mean, that's no secret. Like that's the game. But if China doesn't get shipments of food from the United States of America every 3 days, they starve. There's no incentive for them to go to war with the United States of America, because we can literally just turn off the food supply or the energy supply and they're done. We don't have to drop bombs to beat that country. We literally just have to stop corn from showing up, So like people got to stop living in Hollywood land and like actually think about things. Think about real life and think about incentives. But unfortunately, I also believe that critical thinking is a lost art with most people in America.
or
Yeah.
common sense.
I think it's something. I think AI in a lot of ways is going to cause people to almost like de-evolve. It's going to hurt
We're
the critical
already
thinking. 'Cause
started.
people utilize, including myself. I don't know something. Okay, let me check out Gemini or ChatGPT, and it's
Sure.
It's like, what kind of long-term impact is that going to have on us? I really do worry about that, but there's really no avoiding it.
So if you look throughout history, every technological advancement has actually created more abundance for mankind. Every technological advancement has ultimately been a net positive. AI is exactly the same thing, right? Social media, you can is it a net positive? Probably. But are there a lot of negative things that happen? Yes. And we'll slowly get to that, right? It used to be our banking and payment system, right? It was it's like so much black money in the banking and payment system. And then we got that under control. Organized crime used to be a massive problem. We got that under control. So every technological advancement is going to be a net positive for society. The only difference with AI, 95% chance it actually leads to greater abundance. The 5% chance we use it to kill each other.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, it's like all in how you use it.
Yeah. Everything is a neutral for the most part. And people are going to primarily use tools in a way that benefits them the most. And it usually doesn't benefit you to use a tool to burn your neighbor's field, burn your neighbor's crops. It benefits you to use a tool to increase the yield of your own crops. And so, that's what we've seen all throughout history, right? I mean, you can go back to the printing press, and the scribes were like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And, the automobile, self-checkout at the grocery store, right? I mean, so these like, it's all going to take jobs. What I will say is that AI is not coming for most people's jobs, especially on the creative side. People using AI are coming for their jobs. And so AI is a tool, just like the internet. I mean, thank God for the University of YouTube, right? I probably wouldn't have made it through undergrad otherwise. So the internet is a positive tool that we use for a lot of good. There's also bad that happens from it. Yeah. AI is going to be no different.
Oh yeah.
And when you look at what AI allows us to do, my company 10 Point Data, we're doing things with a staff of like 5 people that previously 5 years ago would have taken a staff of 50 people.
I just said that to her, even with podcasting, same exact thing. We're able to do and automate so much stuff that it would have taken 20 people to do what we've done. The problem is, so is all your competition. So it's like you still have to step up the game and put in the work. But
well, you'd be surprised. Not all your competition. Right. Technology adoption curves are pretty well understood. And right, as a podcaster, you're going to be on the early adopter side. But if you we at DeliverFund, we were using AI technologies back in we first started using them back in 2016. I'm sorry, 2017.
Okay.
So we've understood, adversarial AI models for years. So people who are just like, ChatGPT is the first AI that they've used. And they don't understand that every time they plug something into Google Maps, they've been using AI. Those people are actually kind of midway through that technology distribution curve. And then there's the long tail where there's a lot of people who just generationally don't even need it.
Yeah.
And so, we're also going to have a lot less menial jobs, right? AI is going to solve that problem where there's very unfulfilling jobs that currently we have people doing, and they don't really want to do those jobs, but it's kind of a dead end job that they're in. AI is going to take a lot of those jobs. So I think we're going to I think AI is going to lead to an age of abundance, but I'm generally a pretty optimistic person.
So am I. I think why think negative? It doesn't do you any good. Just ramps up the anxiety and fear. But
it's true.
If I wasn't a optimistic person, then I wouldn't have said pararescue has a greater than 90% chance of not making it. Oh, well then I'm not going to, the odds are stacked against me. I'm not going to do that.
Exactly.
The Central Intelligence Agency hires 1% by their own publicly. This is what they've said. They hire 1% of the people who end up in their application process. So a 99% chance of not making it. I'm not going to let that deter me. Harvard, I had a 5% chance of acceptance. Now, Harvard's graduation rates are really high because the acceptance rate is really low. So at a 5% chance of getting in Harvard, and I did.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't look at what can't happen. I look at the possibilities of what can happen.
Yeah.
And go for it.
Yeah. I love that.
Play as big and hard as I possibly can.
Yeah, that's kind of where we're at in our life too.
Yeah.
Just giving everything our all. You know, we have days like the last couple of days I've been like so shot.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, my body's like, you're going to stop right now.
We've gotten more done in the past 3 weeks than we have in the past 6 months as far as, recording, editing and stuff. But it's just us right now.
Awesome.
But,
Yeah, but it feels good.
Yeah. Progress equals happiness.
The motivation and the consistency.
Yeah.
You know,
we are not, the modern society has created too much comfort. We are not made for comfort, especially men, right? I can't speak to women because I have exactly 0 days being one. But I know some, and I still don't understand them. Married to one, still don't understand them. Have one that has my genetics, still don't understand them. My son, I get that. Like, oh, of course you want to jump off the roof. Let me show you how to do that safely. But we are made, and I believe this applies to both men and women. Like, we are made to slay dragons. We are made to find a righteous mission and to pursue that righteous mission, and that might be, being a stay-at-home mom is a righteous mission. Being a pediatric cancer surgeon is a righteous mission. Being a sniper at CAG is a righteous mission. Being a PJ is a righteous mission. Like, we are made to find and slay dragons. And that by definition is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And if we are not, but those are the happiest people.
Yeah.
The people who are generationally wealthy, sitting on a beach, drop shipping stuff off Alibaba, the most miserable people on right? You're people who are pursuing a righteous mission and executing on that and training their bodies and their minds and their spirituality to be a sharp sword to go cut down that dragon. Those are the happiest people on the planet.
Yeah. I like what Jordan Peterson said. I'd kind of tally on that. Essentially, never stop your kids from doing something that's dangerous that they're attempting to do safely.
That's training. For their dragon that they will slay, which may or may not be the same one that you are called to.
Exactly.
Love it.
And I appreciate this.
Yeah, me too. It was fun.
Maybe
a lot of information. Really cool.
Down the road or something. Maybe we could do something again. And
maybe in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll come visit.
Love to go out to Montana, man. That's a dream.
Yeah, come visit.
He's always wanted to go.
January's Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and I've got a number of podcasts, like Cleared Hot as an example, where every year we drop an episode on kind of the state of human trafficking, what's happening, and it's just kind of an annual thing for Human Trafficking Awareness Month to make sure that people get educated and we get the word out there about what's happening and some of the new tactics and techniques and procedures that traffickers are applying against our children on the internet.
So is there anything that you could just shoot out real quick as far, obviously you see behind yourself, DeliverFund.org is your website. Is there anything else you'd want to just self-promote before we let you go?
Sure. I'm on all the social channels at the.nic. That's nic.mckinley. I'm very inactive as much as my team hates it. I'm just not really a social media guy. Learn anything you want about me at Nic McKinley. That's nicmckinley.com. And if you like what we're doing at DeliverFund and you have some philanthropic budget, please donate and support the work that we do. The data and intel that we give to law enforcement is completely free to them because I don't have budget for anything. And so far, we've got 100% prosecution rate on the cases we've been involved in that have gone to court because of the generosity of our donors. So that would be the plug for donating to DeliverFund.
Phenomenal.
Amazing.
And Nic, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
You keep doing what you're doing, man. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thanks for having me.
Soon.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
No problem. I'll kill the recording.